Kyle Katarn was my homeboy. He was the first video game character who really captured my imagination. I played Commander Keen and Duke Nukem and the rest. They weren't exactly interesting people, much less role models. And it's not like anyone grows up wanting to be Mario. But Kyle was the man. Dark Forces, the 1995 classic from LucasArts, had a real story with a real hero as the main character, which was far from a given at the time, especially in FPS or action games. I instantly fell in love with it, and the sequel, Jedi Knight, is still one of my favorites. Seriously, my very first email address was katarn5@hotmail.com, and I think my original password was Jedi, all lowercase, which gives you an idea of how concerned we were about computer security at the time. And while I wouldn't say Jan Ors was my first pixelated crush, that goes to Tanya.
Yeah, baby!
She was definitely up there. So when I went back to play the original version not long ago, I wondered whether it would still hold up after 30 years of evolution in shooters. So much evolution that we've wrapped all the way back around to the concept of boomer shooters. Short answer? Yes. Yes, it does. You can absolutely see why it was so innovative and enthralling at the time. Way more than just a Star Wars-themed Doom clone. But only if you come at it with the right perspective. Because Dark Forces, like Jedi Knight after it, isn't really a shooter in the sense we think of them today. It's not even a boomer shooter, really. It's a first-person platformer, it's a puzzle game, it's an adventure. Whatever you want to call it, it's a hell of a lot of fun. And Kyle Katarn is still the man.
Good job. Let's blow this ice cube.
This is too easy. Now to get to my ship.
When Doom became an instant smash hit in 1993, it immediately inspired a wave of copycats known as Doom clones. In fact, the FPS genre and Doom clone were practically synonymous through the 90s. So when Dark Forces came out in 1995, you could be forgiven for thinking it was little more than a Doom clone with a Star Wars reskin. Not that LucasArts was opposed in principle to Star Wars reskins, Galactic Battleground, but Dark Forces was a legitimate entry that moved the genre forward. Like Doom, the player moves around on a 3D map with a singular horizontal plane, shooting at enemies with a variety of weapons, collecting keys or pressing switches to open doors, and reaching the end of the map to defeat the boss or advance to the next area. The Dark Forces took this to another level, emphasizing verticality made possible by a key innovation, the ability to look up. That's not a joke. Before this, the entire world was on a single plane. In Doom, you could go upstairs or take an elevator to a new plane, but there weren't multiple levels to an individual space, and shooting forward would target enemies regardless of how high or low they appeared. Part of the reason for this were technical limitations with early 3D engines, and part of it was hardware related. The game was designed to work with a keyboard alone in DOS. Dark Forces in 1995 built an engine specifically designed to accommodate the vertical nature of the game, with a world that existed on multiple different planes, and while you still couldn't yet aim with the mouse, you could use keys to look up or down. It was less about aiming your weapon, though, and more about navigating the environment. You still automatically shoot enemies above or below you, though it helps if you look directly at them, and there still isn't a reticle on the screen, but you need to look around to discover ledges and pathways and bridges to find out where to go. It opens up a new world of level design, allowing for crisscrossing passages, secret tunnels, and more complex platforming. Importantly, it accommodates the grand scale of Star Wars locations. From the towering cityscape of Nar Shaddaa to massive droid factories to hulking Imperial warships. The world feels large and open in a way that Doom never could and didn't need to. Doom is intentionally nightmarish and claustrophobic, but Dark Forces brings the genre to a more epic scale. The skins and locations aren't the only good use of the Star Wars IP. Whereas Doom was essentially a shooting gallery inside a maze, your purpose little more than to survive and kill, Dark Forces brought a narrative element that the genre was sorely lacking. Rather than a generic Doom guy, as he'd later be known, you have Kyle Katarn, an Imperial defector and rebel mercenary, along with his pilot and partner, Jan. You aren't fighting off a vague invasion from Mars to Hell, but tracking down and destroying the Empire's Dark Trooper weapons program, with twists and turns along the way. I can't say it's an incredible story. It's not like it's going to make you cry or change how you think about the world. But it is a story, complete with narrative cutscenes. It drives the gameplay, determines your objectives, and gives context to your actions. Like the stories of X-Wing or TIE Fighter, it helps immerse you in the universe of Star Wars in a way that other games didn't even try to do. Each level is a mission with specific objectives that you must accomplish. I know it sounds crazy, but that was innovative at the time. In the first mission, you famously have to steal the Death Star plans from an Imperial base and then escape with them. That's right, Kyle Katarn and Jan were the original Cassian Andor and Jyn. This helps make sense of the world and how you move through it. You're still looking for keys and pressing switches, but it's not a random key to a random door or some magical switch to the demon lair. It's an Imperial keycard to access a sensitive Imperial command center. You don't have to wander around randomly looking for the right path. You can wander around intentionally looking for a way to infiltrate a specific area. Other missions will have you setting charges on a factory core, breaking a prisoner out of a detention center, Crix Madine, future general, by the way, punching dragons to death in a gladiator arena, or sneaking aboard a smuggling ship. There are recurring characters, actual stakes, and a logical flow to the progression of the game. While I can't say that it's the most compelling narrative in gaming, it does exactly what it needs to do. It creates a world, a hero, and a game you'll remember. Mostly. Believe me when I say that playing Dark Forces in 2026 feels like coming home. To a house where I lost my keys and forgot where all the rooms are. But that's a good thing, because it gets to what's special about the experience. And Dark Forces is very much a game that's more about the experience than the action. Some games are the same no matter how many times you play them, and some games change drastically on replay. A Call of Duty match is essentially the same no matter when you boot it up, and there's a certain benefit to that consistency year after year. Then you have a game like Dark Souls, one of my personal top 10 games, certainly in playtime. I've played so many runs with different weapons and builds. I've done a level 1 run, I've done no death runs, I've played a new game plus 10, but nothing compares to that first blind run. You have no idea what's coming or where to go. Danger lurks around every corner. Every enemy feels dangerous. Bosses can seem impossible. You're sweating, heart racing, carefully feeling through every encounter, praying you see a bonfire. It's terrifying and awesome. Once you know what to do, once you've gotten used to the combat and the tricks and the boss patterns, it becomes a much different game. It stops being about mystery and danger and survival, and instead becomes about execution and skill. Before long, you're running past all the enemies, carrying everything, and dodge rolling circles around bosses wearing nothing but your underwear and a greatsword. It's still a great game, still fun, but it's a fundamentally different experience. And you can never get that exact experience back, even for Dark Souls 2 or 3 or Bloodborne or Elden Ring. You know the answer to the puzzle, and you can't unknow it. Dark Forces is a game closer to Dark Souls than Call of Duty. It's always fun to play, but to get the most out of it, you really need to experience it as if for the first time. Because although you spend a lot of time shooting, that's not at all the only reason to play, especially today. When I say Dark Forces isn't a shooter, I don't mean that literally. Of course, the game involves running around and shooting things. If you're watching this video, almost every clip involves firing a blaster at some enemy. But the idea of a shooter has changed so much since the early days of Doom and Dark Forces that it gives you the wrong impression of what the game is about. It would be like calling Mario a head stomper or Final Fantasy a random battler. Just because stomping on Goombas or fighting random battles are core gameplay mechanics doesn't mean they define those games or determine their shape. So yeah, you do a lot of shooting in Dark Forces, and don't get me wrong, it's a blast. As a kid, just to hold a blaster, line up a stormtrooper, lasers spraying wildly around you, and blow them away was awesome. It was the best we got at the time. But playing it today and comparing it to modern shooters really makes it obvious that Dark Forces was designed around a different concept. It had to be, because the shooting was so limited mechanically. You don't have the control to aim precisely, so combat encounters have to be simple. Enemies that are high above you or behind windows can be frustrating to hit, and it's often easier just to run by them until you get a better angle. But most are just standing out in the open waiting for you to turn the corner. They don't take cover or move around much, but they will blast you if you aren't quick enough to take them down. There's really not much to it. Try to keep the enemies in front of you, hold down the trigger, circle strafe at all times, duck behind a corner if you need to. The game doesn't ask you to do a lot of strategizing or maneuvering or careful shooting because it can't. You can see this in how the levels are built, with open areas, little extra cover, and few arenas or set pieces. Compare this to a more modern but otherwise similar shooter like Halo, another story-driven, linear sci-fi shooter that came out 6 years later. Halo's levels are designed to force you to fight tactically and shoot precisely in a variety of situations. The large outdoor areas are strewn with cover that provide multiple angles of approach. Tight corridors put you in direct confrontations or give a pause between the action, opening into multi-level battle arenas where most of the fighting occurs. Enemies rush or flank you, take cover, throw grenades to flush you out, or snipe you from elevation. Combat is a puzzle that involves picking off enemies, moving between cover, controlling areas, and prioritizing threats. The maps have a certain narrative and logical structure, but the design is essentially moving you from one combat arena to another, a continual loop of action sequences. There's rarely a time when you don't know where to go. The enemies are the game. Keep pushing forward until everything is dead. And Dark Forces is the opposite. The levels are the game, puzzles that must be solved, and the enemies are there to prevent you from doing it and keep you entertained along the way. You never know where to go or how to advance, often doubling back, opening doors, or searching for secret passages. The maps are designed as mazes and fortresses, not combat arenas. That's why I say it's not primarily a shooter like Halo. It's a game about traversing the environment, about exploring, about wayfinding as much as about shooting. In this sense, I think the closest modern comparison to Dark Forces is actually Jedi Fallen Order, another game with passable combat but great environmental design and exploration, where just traversing through the world and being part of the universe is a joy. However, this does mean that once you know where to go and what to do, the game changes dramatically. Several times I spent 30 minutes or more making my way through a level only to die near the end. Did I mention you have limited lives before you have to restart the entire level? Welcome to the 90s. While on the first attempt I spent a lot of time looking around, searching every hallway, checking for secrets, running past the correct passageway a dozen times before I found it, the second time I ran through the level in 15 minutes. It's still fun, but it's not the same. So it's a good thing that while everything looked and felt as familiar as my childhood home, I couldn't remember any of the details. I had to solve the puzzles and learn the enemies and find the secrets all over again. It felt like playing it for the first time, and I wouldn't have it any other way. Dark Forces is a delightfully simple game. I hate to even call it retro, because it honestly belongs to a whole different world of games that we will probably never recover, for better or worse. Even retro games today tend to be retro in aesthetics only, pixelated on the surface but complex in design. Often that's a good thing, making for deeper, more engaging, longer-lasting gameplay. There's a reason we've evolved more complex systems as the capabilities of our technology has increased, and it would be boring if games never progressed. That being said, I find it refreshing to occasionally return to a game like Dark Forces where I don't have to learn combos, allocate points, hone strategies, and use every button on the keyboard to deal with our rock, paper, scissors style enemy encounters. You can run, you can jump once, and you can shoot your gun. That's it. You have 10 weapons to choose from if you count your fists. There's rarely a time when you are required to use one over the other. Chances are you'll stick to the reliable E11, despite its Stormtrooper-approved accuracy, or the repeater rifle, depending on the ammo available, switching to others only in special circumstances. Not to say all the weapons aren't cool, they just aren't necessary or even as effective as the basic ones, either too slow or too unreliable to avoid taking damage. After all, there's only a few enemy types, 3 Imperial officers, a few droids, a couple alien pirates, and some animals, and all of them go down in a few hits from anything. They're dangerous in groups, but the only real threats are the Dark Trooper variants, where you'll want to use their own powerful but rare assault cannon against them. Attrition is the real danger, because health packs and shield batteries are limited. Recharging shields and Estus flasks hadn't been invented yet, so you need to limit taking damage as much as possible, and the only way to do it is to shoot the enemies before they shoot you. You don't have abilities or force powers to help you yet, either. Thermal detonators are a thing, but only as a separate weapon, not as a panic button to take out groups. And you have limited lives, so be careful and look before you leap. In the end, it all comes back to you and your trusty blaster trying to make your way in the world. The game gives you objectives like find the plans, or set 3 charges, or locate the captive and escape the prison, but there are no quest markers, no waypoints, no prompts for switches, and a very limited map. For some people, that might be frustrating, especially when you eventually find the answer and wonder how you ever missed it. But it's also incredibly satisfying. Rarely do games outside the puzzle genre ever let you feel like you figured something out on your own. So if you do pick this up, do yourself a favor and go in blind. Keep your expectations low, your eyes open, and your browser off of Google. It might take you a few extra minutes, but it's worth it to experience one of gaming's simple pleasures.
Very impressive, General. The Emperor will be most pleased.
Dark Forces would have been much more than a Doom clone even if it weren't a Star Wars game. It brought real innovation to the genre. But it's also true that Star Wars adds something unique to the package. At the time, it was thrilling just to step into the Star Wars universe from an all-new perspective, meet new characters like Kyle and Jan, see familiar faces like Mon Mothma, Jabba, and Boba Fett, and wield weapons from the movies and books. And what better targets to shoot at than stormtroopers? Everything is cohesive and authentic, drawing from a wide variety of Star Wars lore and making some of its own. Even today, I can't tell you how cool it is to run through these levels, gunning down stormtroopers, banging my head against every wall looking for secrets, while classic Star Wars MIDI music swells in the background. Like TIE Fighter, Dark Forces has an original score, though you'll hear plenty of the classic themes mixed in, and it also utilizes the iMuse system for matching the music to events in the game, so the battle themes ramp up during combat, while the gentler melodies accompany your exploration. Just listen to this for a moment. How can you play that without a smile on your face? Add in the authentic sound effects and you might just feel like you're in a Star Wars movie, starring Kyle Katarn as one of those lovable Star Wars rogues. True, he doesn't get a ton of character development here. That would have to wait for Jedi Knight and those incredible live-action cutscenes. But still, Kyle is a Star Wars character through and through. A rebel, a fighter, an underdog, and a hero. The Force is strong with him, with all of this.